How's it hanging, everybody? Welcome back to Tag Team, the Pokemon trading card game's premier podcasting duo. My name is Riley Hulbert, joined, as always, by my good friend, Mr. JW Kriewall. JW, how's it going today?
It's going pretty good, Riley. Happy to be back. I mean, I was here last week, but happy to be back.
But still happy to
Anyway,
be back again
you know?
this week.
That's right. So, it's just been a solid week for me. Been running around with the kids. We've had some somewhat unfortunate nanny incidents. Just she was out for a week, took a week of vacation, which was fine. And then this week actually had like some health issues, which she's working through.
Oh no.
So we've been doing the like juggling of the kids and like weaving in a nanny and like taking half days and just kind of like doing a hodgepodge until she gets better. But yeah, that's been kind of my week of like working super early in the morning to like check emails and get some stuff done. And then like watching the kids and kind of that midday when it's a little bit slower. And then, working later in the evening to make up for the day. It's just been kind of awkward in that regard.
Oh.
So,
Well, sorry, it's been tough.
hey, it happens. That's the joy of having kids. I'm sure a lot of the listeners will relate. But hopefully that's in your future one day. You'll learn the pleasures of juggling all that.
Hopefully nanny difficulties are in my future.
Yeah, hopefully. No. Hopefully having the children, because I think of it as a blessing, right? It's a blessing to be having these problems.
It's a good dude, man. It's a good dude. Honestly, when you said nanny incidents, I was picturing like, the nanny showed up, knife in hand, was ready to murder us all. Like that's what incidents implies.
Yeah.
Me.
She snuck into our house, and we love our nanny.
Like took our safe box.
No, we love our nanny. She's been awesome. It's just been kind of great. It's been a weird couple weeks because again, she took that week off, and it's like, okay, that's fine. But then to like back it up with being out, obviously take the time for your health. That's like not the issue, but it's just like a lot of time being without her. So we're not even 3/4 of the way through the year, so we're kind of like trying to balance our PTO against our work responsibilities. It's just a whole
of course.
So anyway.
Yeah, I mean, but that kind of happens too, though. I feel like where like the sick days need to be chained against the vacation for whatever, because, for example, like I had some friends over this past weekend, and we were staying up later than average because we were catching up and hanging out and playing games and stuff. But then I feel like crap the next day. So it's like, okay, do I take an extra day of sick time? Like I'm not trying to stay on like an extended vacation, but now I feel like crap.
100%.
So,
Yep, absolutely. So
it's
anyway, how are you, Riley?
Well, I'm good. Yeah, like I said, I had my college roommates stopped in to Madison, so we had 4 additional people over at the apartment. Whipped out multiple air mattresses, which thankfully Jill and I did actually have multiple because we both had 1 or more air mattresses in our previous apartment. So we were able to accommodate everyone great, and it was a ton of fun and lots of board games. We played a lot of tennis, did kind of the Madison staples, and it was a really good time. So
awesome.
Took a nice long weekend and said goodbye to them yesterday afternoon. Now we're here back in the swing of things, back in the grind. I also will say it was really nice kind of having like a 4-4-4 situation, like 4 days on for work, a 4-day weekend, and 4 days on again. Like that feels really nice too.
Yeah. I mean, weren't they thinking that would be the new normal?
I don't know. One of my friends who was over was saying that he has like, it's like 9 out of 10 type of situation. Like every second Friday, the whole company's off.
I see. Okay. So they kind of weave it in.
It's 80/9 is like how he described it. So they have to work 80 hours out of 9 business days, but then they don't work that second Friday, which I would definitely take that trade-off any day.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. That's interesting. Yeah, I've been having some fun. I've taken some days off, so me and the girls have gone to the zoo, right? One morning.
Classic
so that's
JW
always,
activity.
dude. Absolutely, I'm a big zoo lover. Got to see, got to see the lions
Yes.
at the zoo. They were like up and walking about. There's still
That's
one
rare.
animal.
Yeah.
There's still one animal that I have not seen at the Turtleback Zoo, which is the one that's closest to me here in New Jersey. And I like, we've been to the zoo maybe half a dozen times, and I always go there because it's like one of my favorite animals, but it has never been out, so I'm not actually convinced that the zoo has this animal. The black bear.
The black bear.
Yeah.
The friendlier bear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I've been a little disappointed in the Turtleback Zoo over my last few visits. No sign.
Yeah.
No sign of the black bear.
Well, hopefully you can spot them. You know, those it's tough, man. Like some of those creatures just really be like sleeping and resting and stuff.
I know. They should be entertaining me.
Exactly. Dance.
What are they doing? What are they doing?
Yeah.
Anyway.
I feel
Speaking
we don't really have a legendary zoo around here, so don't get to go as often as you, I don't think.
Speaking of entertaining us, we have some news here for to cover. Obviously, we have, we're doing this podcast. We got news to cover. We got some. Well, first I want to talk about the winter promos, the Pikachu promos that they're giving out in honor of the World Championships this week. We have Worlds on Friday, Saturday, and then, of course, Championships Sunday. So we're going to talk a little bit about what we think are going to be some of the most impactful cards for the weekend, as well as provide you with our breakdown, what we would expect in terms of the meta and a tier list for the World Championships. So wanted to take a quick, just kind of brief jump over to the
take a jaunt.
Take a jaunt, if you will you, over to look at some of these Pikachu promos. These have been like crazy, dude. I really wanted to get my hands on them. It features, they've done this for the last couple of years, but they have a Pikachu fighting against the main card from the last World Championship winning Masters deck. So in this case, it's Pikachu against an Iron Thorns in the backdrop of, the World's area, right, of the current year. So
or some sort of mysterious arena looking thing.
Well, because they did last year, it was Pikachu fighting Mew, which was the Mew VMAX deck, right? From Vance Kelly, but that was in Hawaii. So it's kind of like the old into the new, where they have the backdrop of the new area with the previous Master World Champion Pokemon.
To be honest, until you said that, I didn't clock that the Pokemon Pikachu was fighting was always like the previous winner. So that's pretty hype, actually.
Yeah. So it's cool. And this is, I think, the first year that they're doing this extra stamp on the card. So as you can see here, it says winner. And then they do give out a generic copy of this card with just the watermark, the Play Pokemon watermark. But then also, again, we have this winner stamp that's given out to, I think leagues do it a little bit differently. Some will do it for their weekly like locals. Some will have a special tournament where they give this away. I've seen some people get this card from winning a challenge or a cup, which I don't quite think it was intended to be like that, but no matter. So it's kind of an interesting thing. I was looking up the prices for these cards, and it kind of shocked me. I mean, it's a relatively new market, right? Because these cards have really only been able to go out into players' hands this week, but you're looking at like 300, 350, 400 for some of these cards. That is like crazy to me. Considering like every league will get one or more copies of this card.
Well, it's interesting because it's supposed to be from the 11th through the 17th, like this entire week, basically Monday to Sunday is when you're supposed to do those tournaments. I think you're right. You're not really supposed to be doing them with the league challenge. I think it's supposed to be either your regular league tournament or like a dedicated one. Regardless, like I don't know about you, but I was looking at the dedicated section of the event locator. None of my leagues actually have one posted for this yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and unfortunately,
I
I
don't know
wonder
what the
if
deal is.
there's like, this is a major problem that I have with at least the New Jersey scene. Some of these card stores, I mean, they're great. Pretty much every card store I've gone to has been like awesome, like for the tournament. Like it's been a great experience. Like this is not
Yeah.
downplaying any of the tournament experience, but it's been really hard to find information, or at least reputable information online for some of these tournaments. Like they'll post very vaguely on the Pokemon website, and then you're
Yeah.
actually supposed to learn about the tournament on a Discord, right? Like for some of these,
Dude,
it's
yeah, I
like
hate the Discords, man.
for some of these, it's like they'll have the time on the Pokemon website, but they actually mean that's like when registration ends and not when the tournament starts. So like there's like timing issues there, or they won't specify that you need a deck list. Like they won't have deck list provided, right? Like that kind of thing. So there's a myriad of other problems that I've had, but it's just like the vagueness of it all is really difficult to navigate sometimes.
No, the Discord being like the primary source of information actually frustrates me so much, because unless you're already like engaged on the Discord, how are you supposed to even know that like Discord's the place to look? It's so frustrating.
I know. I hear you.
Like it's got to be on your website or something.
Because I would pop in like to some. There's definitely local stores that like have run tournaments that I've had no idea about because they just don't have it posted anywhere that I know of. And it's like trolling through all these Discords and trying to get plugged in. It's like a lot of work to do all that. I just wish it was more accessible. Anyway, all that to say, these are pretty cool.
Pokemon does have the app.
The app is horrible, man. The problem with the app is like nobody actually like tested it or used it before it came out, because you cannot like filter very well. The radius ends at 100 miles, which is particularly relevant for those people that are in, the Midwest or the West, where events are a little bit more spread out. You can have, players in remote areas that have to travel over 100 miles and they just like literally cannot look up kind of that next tier of events.
That's interesting.
And it's just, and then like, there's just like little UI things where it's like, if you click on a store, you have to navigate using the button, because if you click back, it takes you to the last web page you visited instead of going back to the Pokemon page. Anyway, there's just like little things I'm like, this could be so awesome. I haven't used the mobile app, to be fair. I've only used it on the desktop.
See, I've only used the mobile app. It's actually, I think the filtering might be worse on the mobile app, because I only see up to 50 miles. I'm looking at it right now on my phone. I will say, I think it's, at least for me, like there's a decent amount of leagues and stuff in Madison. It's nice to be able to see just opening the app and instantly have like the challenges and stuff.
Yeah.
But I think it still has the same fundamental problem. Like it's reliant on these stores like actually having information on their like play Pokemon pages, right?
Yeah.
So like if they're not actually updating their play Pokemon information, then the app's not going to have anything.
Yes. Right. Exactly. And then the other problem I have is like the events are not listed. It's listed by store. So you have to like click into every store to see what events there are, as opposed to what used to be.
There's an events tab on the...
Oh, there is. Okay. Maybe I just have completely missed that, or maybe that's been added recently, but...
Well, it's on the mobile app for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll have to check it out on the desktop anyway. If you guys have any gripes that you want to let us know about in the comments, please do. Because there's certainly improvements that could be made, but that's neither here nor there. I think we should move on to the meat of the episode, and that is the Worlds format. We have Worlds coming up on Friday for the big one, the granddaddy of them all, as they say, and we're going to talk about it. Let's take a look at some of the major decks, give some of our thoughts, our predictions, and we have a little bit of a game mixed in here as well. based on some of the what did they used to call it? They used to call it the
fantasy
Worlds
worlds.
draft, fantasy worlds
Yeah.
draft. So we'll mix that in here halfway through as well. So let's take a look at it. These represent some of the top meta decks for this tier list today. We have Goldengo, Dragapult Dusknoir, Grimmsnarl, Gardevoir, Raging Bolt, Ogerpon, Dragapult, Ethan's Typhlosion. Okay, maybe you could argue that that's not necessarily a top deck, but we will do that in just a second. Dragapult, Charizard, Joltik Box, Charizard Pidgeot, Flareon, Ho-Oh, Crustle, kind of the big wall deck of the current format, Charizard Dusknoir, Enzork, Gardevoir Jellicent, and I just threw this one in for fun, Terrabox. So where do you want to start, Riley? What deck do you want to discuss first?
I mean, we could probably even just start with the top with Goldengo, and maybe we like alternate like a deck on the top and a deck on the bottom of the list.
Sure.
So
Okay.
we're not just talking about all the top dogs and then all the
Yeah,
all the
absolutely.
rest.
Absolutely. Where are you slotting Goldengo and why? And give me a meta prediction. Because I'm kind of thinking like this is going to be one of the most played decks. I feel like you're kind of in agreement. But,
Yeah.
what makes Goldengo so good, even with what I would imagine is a pretty sizable target on its back for Worlds?
Yeah, I guess maybe we'll start with the why, and then we can do some of the placement.
Sure.
So, well, I guess in terms of placement, to me, like Goldengo like rides the border of S and A. I think there's an easy argument for S. So why? Goldengo was already a really strong deck, right? It was a popular, reliable, strong pick over the last format, but it struggled to like really put a lot away, all said and done. Goldengo, though, got a lot of great buffs with the Black Bolt and White Flare set, which we've talked about on the cast already. But for those of you who are uninitiated, the Genesect EX is alone tremendous for a Goldengo. So Genesect EX, of course, getting 2 Metal Evolution Pokemon from your deck every single turn. You can just so quickly get those 4 Goldengo into play. But not only did Goldengo get a new EX Pokemon, it also got access to Air Balloon. And when you combine these two things together, it made Goldengo a deck that went from formerly being very, very reliant on like going second, getting the TM evolution off to get that like fully fledged start, to now being very flexible with how it plays its game. The Air Balloon allows it to draw more cards over the course of the game and just makes retreating easier and smoother. The deck is just faster, more flexible, and stronger, like with the addition of these cards. It makes playing the Scissor like a little more appetizing as well, since you can always search it for free off the Genesect. And it makes playing the Baby Genesect even easier because Air Balloon is just such an amazing tool to slap on it to activate the Ace Nullifier. Yeah. So Goldengo is so good, and it takes good matchups to some of the best decks in the format right now. In Gardevoir, for example, is one of Goldengo's better matchups, and Gardevoir is another one of the best decks in this format. Goldengo also does pretty well against some of the other top contenders in Dragapult and Grimmsnarl. So Goldengo's Achilles heel is the rabble rousers. Those like niche decks at kind of the fringe of the format that just tear it apart. You're thinking like Ethan's Typhlosion, you're thinking like Flareon, you're thinking Ho-Oh. Yeah. Like those kinds of those weird things. Crustle tears it apart. So to me, Goldengo is very matchup polarizing in some ways. And the way I put it before is it makes me a little anxious that Goldengo takes like slightly favorables to the other like SA tier decks, but then takes like complete auto losses to the fringe, which is why I even hesitate to put Goldengo into S. I think if you're just looking at Goldengo amongst like the 5 other top 5 decks, easy S tier to me. Yeah. So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I can't quite put it. I'm kind of with you as you were saying the second half of that analysis. I can't quite put it in that S tier. For me, it just has too many relatively simple counters, right? You think about Crustal just being a deck that exists. You think about things like Cornerstone being playable in, I mean, frankly, a few different decks, right? Like Charizard decks could play the Cornerstone Mask. Terrabox obviously could play Cornerstone Mask. There's even talk of like Goldango playing a Cornerstone Mask. You could have Cornerstone Mask and Raging Bolt, right? So there's kind of that element too. Like that's just one example, but there are things like Airy is very punishing for Goldango. Rotom is very punishing for Goldango. Item Lock can be extremely punishing for Goldango. So there's a lot of like little things here and there that I would be not hugely worried about, but they do exist, and there are counters available, and relatively unintrusive counters that can be very good against Goldango. And so that kind of leads me, into this A tier. Now, I will say, on the other hand, you brought up some really good points on the Genesect and the Air Balloon. I mean, those are insane consistency cards for this deck, and just like in general, right? Being able to have the flexibility to go first in certain matchups, or just if you're forced to go first, and be able to pull out that knockout on turn 2. I mean, that puts you so far ahead in a lot of matchups, being able to take that turn 2 knockout going first, and then follow that up with one shots from there on out. Right, that's like such a massive advantage that Goldango has that few other decks can really boast. So, Goldango is certainly like what I see as like the top of the fair decks, but it is easily counterable. It is very consistent. I think you're playing your game much more frequently than some of these other top decks, but given the amount of pretty solid counters to it, I think it goes into A for me. Now, in terms of the meta prediction, I kind of have this a bit higher. Like I see this as being a very strong pick amongst many players. Players that are very experienced are looking at Goldango. I've heard a lot of certainly less experienced players that are kind of shifting towards Goldango as well. It just seems like a very again, like solid pick. It's not going to take a ton of brain power to like really pilot it at a high level. And so I think that just kind of makes it a strong contender. It really reminds me of Fusion Mew from a couple of worlds ago, right? It's just very heavy hitting, pretty low maintenance overall, does what it wants to do most of the time, puts on a lot of pressure on the opponent. Draws a lot of cards, right? Like the parallels are there. And so I see this deck as being one that a lot of players will gravitate towards, maybe putting their own little spin on it. So I'm going to give it, I don't know, what do you think? Like I kind of see it as like, this could be the most played deck at Worlds. So I'm kind of like edging into that like 16, 17, 18%.
I think I don't know, the Worlds like specific metagames are always a little tougher to predict, I feel like, just because it's a really concentrated like set of players who are working in their little testing pods and coming up with their crazy like Worlds plays. So I feel like it's hard to get it as accurate for Worlds as a regional or like NAIC by comparison. I kind of see it in like the 15-ish% range, but maybe that's too conservative.
All right, we'll meet in the middle. I
agree. I think it'll be one of the top played decks.
We'll meet in the middle. Goldango at 16. Yeah. All right, let's kind of work through some of the bottom tier. Somewhat quickly. Let's not spend maybe too much time, but let's talk about Flareon. Now, I think one of the benefits to Flareon, like we can't really talk about Goldango without talking about Flareon. Like this to me seems like one of the big counter decks that can also somewhat handle some of the other major threats, right? You're looking at Flareon, you can have the Clefairy, access to Clefairy for easy easy Dragapult knockouts. You have just kind of a very fast and consistent, like you can play the Water Ogerpon to deal with some of the other evolving decks. You have a lot of just different options throughout the course of the game, and it definitely is a deck that, while it's on the fringes, it utilizes a lot of tricks, has a lot of different lines you can play, and it's a deck that I see as something that a very skilled player could take and do well with, because it almost kind of seems like in any given turn you never really know what's going to happen, right? So to me, this deck, the big selling point is like you're beating Goldango, you have a solid matchup into Dragapult, solid matchup into Grimmsnarl. Gardevoir is going to be tough, but
Yeah.
you have lines into pretty much everything if you can find them, if your deck works. Big consistency issue, I think, for Flareon, but again, you have a lot of options over the course of a game. So to me, this seems like a C, maybe B tier deck, but I kind of put it in that C tier deck, certainly in the amount of play that it will see. I just don't love Flareon as a pick, but again, in the right hands, it can go far.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if you just look at overall online stats, Flareon's win rate isn't bad, particularly against the matchups that you're mentioning, like the Grimmsnarl and the Goldango. I think are really the hills to stand on for Flareon.
Yeah.
The Leafeon being a fairly standardized inclusion now, whereas I feel like prior to NAIC, it was like could go either way, and now it feels like every list I look at has a Leafeon in it. So you're looking at two really good matchups, or at least solid matchups amongst the top like 4 decks. I think Flareon's issue isn't necessarily just consistency as much as it's also, like, in my opinion, pretty reliant on the coin flip. You really want to go first with that deck. That's like really what sets all of your momentum up to continue the rest of the game, is that going first into getting the Flareon attack turn 2. That's like the rhythm you're really looking to establish. As with any Noctowl deck, you really want to go first. And then you pair that with some of the disruption that's available in this format, right? Like you have decks like Gardevoir that are gonna Iona you to low and snipe off all your Noctowls, and all of a sudden like you can't draw out of it. Same with like Dragapult, for example. Even though you have access to the Clefairy, like it's still not ideal to lose access to your entire engine like that. So I think that's where Flareon will really stutter. I see it kind of, it's probably on the border of B and C. Maybe we'll see like where the rest of the decks fall and see where Flareon fits in amongst them. I don't think it'll be heavily played at all, though. I would be surprised to see this make a graphic.
Yeah, you're probably looking at it somewhere in that like 5% range.
Yeah, agreed.
Not a deck that I would really expect to see. I wouldn't be shocked with like a top 8 performance out of a Flareon player, but it just isn't something that has kind of proven itself necessarily to be. I mean, if it was a better deck, I think it would be more played, right? You can kind of make that argument for every, low play deck, but it just doesn't have some of the consistency.
Kind of cooked them, bro.
I know, right? It just doesn't have some of that consistency that I think you would look at for a deck to bring to the World Championships. But in any case, Flareon Noctowl, interesting choice. I think we should go to another kind of low tier deck, and that is Joltik Box. So Joltik Box, a favorite of Jesse Parker, is likely going to be playing this Joltik Box deck to the World Championships. I mean, it kind of almost goes without saying he loves to get Marid on one last ride. Joltik Box to me is, and we had talked about this last week, of like, it's the deck you bring if you really don't have any other options. I see it in that same kind of tier as Flareon. It doesn't have a high play rate. The consistency can sometimes be a bit of an issue because you really do have to like roll out, early and then sustain. It's not necessarily the early game consistency that I'm worried about. The Joltik attack should be happening, 9 out of 10 games, but it's that mid and late game consistency where you're drawing, that one final gust that you need to take your last 2 prizes, or that one final combo piece, that one energy, or the Clefairy Crispin combo that you need to knock out the Dragapult, or whatever it happens to be. But there's always that kind of pivotal moment in that mid to late game where you get Iono'd and the whole game hinges on those 4 or 5 cards you draw plus your draw abilities. So Joltik Box is an interesting one. Like Joltik Box to me, I think could perform well. This is the scenario that I see Joltik Box performing really well in. Is if every other like top player or high performing deck just like overcooks a little bit, right? Because I could see scenarios where a lot of these, higher tier decks like Goldango players try to like fit too much in, or you have like players trying to come up with some like crazy rogue deck, and they don't really account for like the Joltik matchup. Like I just kind of see a world where if everyone kind of overcooks a little bit, Joltik Box can really thrive. It does have pretty solid matchups, just like Golden Go, into the top echelon, but there are counters, like soft counters. For instance, Gardevoir can play an elevated Bravery Charm count and save their monkeys from being handsed, and just kind of leave Joltik Box without very many options for knockouts. That's like a soft, again, kind of a soft counter, just off the top of my head. So, there are ways that players can play around Joltik Box, but again, if the player base at large is not really considering it, then I kind of like, I can see a world where, and maybe this is just cope for Jesse's sake, but I can see a world where Joltik just kind of like shoots through all this, detritus and weird stuff and makes a deep run.
Yeah, I think I generally agree with you. I don't think this deck's winning Worlds, I can tell you that much. Uh-huh. I could see a Joltik making it deeper into the Worlds for much the same reasons as I've said before about Joltik Box. It's a good like equalizer, so to speak. Yeah. Like if you think your opponent's gonna outplay you, like Joltik Box removes like the outplaying from the equation. Yeah. You can just steamroll them with an Iron Hands, and if they whiff a turn, then you win. To me, the Joltik Box kind of entirely hinges, in my opinion, on your opponent like whiffing or being stunted completely out of the game. Like you want that like two swings with hands against the evolving matchups, really.
Yeah.
And against the non-evolving matchups, you're hoping that, or like the Goldango matchup, for example, you're hoping that they have to like hit into a Pikachu and not knock it out. And it's just like, man, it feels so bad that like I can kind of do whatever, and it ultimately just comes down to my opponent to like not have the pieces to play the game.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I didn't really like playing Joltik Box at Milwaukee. Is it just felt like, I could do whatever it was that I was doing. It didn't really matter in the end. But that's also like the pro of the counterpoint is that's the pro of Joltik Box, is you can just do whatever it is the deck's telling you to do, and sometimes it'll win you games that against, if you're just playing a Dragapult Mirror, for example, maybe you would have lost that game against that same player.
100%. So how much do you agree with the C tier for this deck?
I think I agree with C tier. I think it'll be more popular than Flareon, to be honest. Mm-hmm. I think for all the reasons I just said, like Flareon's a much more complicated deck to get like that payoff. Joltik is straightforward, low to the ground. It's a great way to like even the playing field.
Yeah. So where do you see it in terms of play rate?
Yeah, maybe like 7% or something like that. That's maybe a little high, but Joltik has been decently heavily played at like every tournament, so I don't want to just write it off.
And maybe there's new innovations that players are coming up with, right? Like there is a bit.
I mean, there's like the Eels out, there's the Zekrom out, like there's stuff, to explore.
Yep. But how much of that will be found, and how confident will players be with this archetype? That is the main question. So why don't you give us a higher tier archetype, Riley? Let's give a go at something in that SAB.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let's take a look at one of the very best decks in the format then, and Dragapult Dusknoir. So Dragapult, of course, being, in my opinion, like top 2 archetypes in the format on the face of it. The Dragon's just so good, man. It has the draw engine built in. The spread is just so powerful in this format as it was in this previous format. Psyduck dodged the being printed allegations, so the Dusknoir is still at maximum power. And just setting up those like crazy multi-prize endgames, being immune to Iono the whole way through. That's what Dragapult does best, and people are gravitating towards the Dusknoir version in particular right now. It's just that little bit of more explosive firepower, and it's doing well. Like in online meta, it's got a great overall win percentage. It's, I imagine, going to be a top choice for many players. If not Dusknoir, then its cousin and like straightforward Dragapult.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a good deck. Dragapult's the only deck I've played since NAIC. Literally, I've not touched a single other card archetype since NAIC, and I'm a truther, to be honest. I think Dragapult's an amazing deck. I think Dragapult Dusknoir.
Yeah, go ahead. No,
I think Dragapult Dusknoir is like an S tier deck.
I'm kind of with you there. I kind of see it straddling the line between S and A. The argument that I have for putting it in S is you look at some of the limitless data from these tournaments, and yeah, you're right on the money where it's like, yeah, it has really solid matchups and like pretty much 50-50s from that wide pool of data from the online tournaments. Now, if we kind of filter that down even further, once you see players making deep runs with Dragapult, that implies that they're maybe a better player. All of a sudden, those win rates go up, quite significantly. And so I'm kind of with you. It's like the limitless data on the whole maybe conceals a bit of this deck's strength, because it it shows like, okay, 50-50s, like, okay, this there maybe is, this isn't just the world beater deck. But then you kind of drill down a little bit and you do see elevated win rates for this archetype as the as those rounds progress. So I'm kind of with you there, Riley, on this being maybe the deck of the tournament, right, heading in. And it's really no surprise that we would have two of the best decks have the only draw engines in the game, right? You're looking at Goldengo with the built-in draw, and then you look at the Dracloaks with the draw. But you said it perfectly, where the ability to delay taking prizes until the end, or just like blowing things up, eliminating the main threat, but then also severely reducing your opponent's hand in a way that they can't stop. Right? Popping a Dusknoir, swinging with a Dragapult, knocking out any of your opponent's stage 2 EXs, and then just setting your opponent back 1 or 2 or 3 more cards than they're expecting to have at that stage of the game. It's like game breaking. So I'll put it at the S tier level. I do agree with you in that it'll be one of the higher played decks from the better players. Right? This is something that it's a deck that's a bit more technical. It's a deck that has a bit more options, and so I'm going to put it kind of, a little lower in the play rate, probably in that, like, I'd say like 13 to 15%. That's kind of where I see it.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind Dragapult's going to be split as well by the Dusknoir players and the straight Dragapult players, so I think it might end up being a little lower than that. For example, Dragapult was not as hot going into NAIC as it is going into Worlds, but it was like 7% going into NAIC. So I see Dragapult Dusknoir maybe like a 10 to 10-ish% deck, and then straight Dragapult taking some of that percentage share too.
Sure. Well, let's put that. I think straight Dragapult does have some, issues. It's a bit more consistent. I think it does have, you're not dealing with that additional line, but you lose a little bit of the depth of the deck. I'm pretty comfortable putting this in like an A tier. Where do you see just straight Dragapult in terms of the amount of play that it'll see this weekend?
Yeah, I mean, straight Dragapult is good. The meta
for
isn't truly like crazy different from how it was in NAIC, and we saw Tord get second place at top four at NAIC. So like straight Dragapult is totally a valid threat. I think the main thing for me for straight Dragapult is you take a lot worse of a Gardevoir matchup, and you're more likely to be vulnerable to the fringe because it's easier to predict just like an evolved Terra type Pokemon attacking. That's easier to like lock out of a game. Whereas with Dusknoir, you open up a lot of like creative angles to fix weird matchups, whether that's by like prize card manipulation, whether that's by straight up attacking with a Dusknoir, for example, like in the Crustles, whatever that looks like.
The damage placement, right? Like the damage placement of the Dragapult gets around a lot of those wall Pokemon as well.
Exactly. So I think it just loses a little bit of that like trickiness that Dusknoir has that like puts it into the S tier for me. I still think it's a phenomenal deck. It's easy A tier in my mind. You just lose some of that. And I do think your Gardevoir matchup is notably worse without access to Dusknoir, which I would say if your goal is to win the World Championship, I feel like you can't just be taking a straight L to Gertie. Not that it's a complete L with straight Dragapult, but it's a lot harder in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know. It's interesting, right? Because like, is Gardevoir on the decline? Like, that is a big question. That's a big. I suppose we like kind of always ask that, right? It's like, is this finally the tournament where Gardevoir drops off?
I almost don't even think it matters, right? Like, even if Gardevoir is like on the overall decline, there will be Guardies making deep runs at this tournament because it is one of the strongest, historically strongest, and most prevalent decks going into this tournament. And like, do you want your top 8 run to be shut down by Guardy when you make it to that stage of the tournament, or do you want to like
preferably
give
not.
yourself the best chance to keep going?
Right. You're right. Okay. Well, we'll see what players are thinking for this weekend. I mean, it's like an 8%. We kind of feeling like that.
I was thinking like the sum up to 18 makes sense to me.
Sure. Okay. Let's do one more, and then we'll get into some of our World's Fantasy draft cards. How's that sound?
Yeah.
All right. Cool. You choose it.
Okay. Yeah, I think the next deck, let's talk about one more on the lower end of the spectrum. And let's talk about Gardevoir Jellicent first. And then after our little break, we can revisit main Gardevoir. So, JW, I'm curious for your thoughts on this. Mine are actually similar to what my thoughts were when Jellicent was very first revealed, and then we kind of got excited about Jellicent when we saw it in Japan. But when Jellicent was first revealed, I thought it would be kind of overcooking to play it in Guardy as any more than like a 1/1 line, because you're just doing too much. you know, like there's too much going on, and that's where I'm about right now. Like, I don't think Jellicent's terrible. It doesn't like tank the whole deck or out of viability or anything. But Gardevoir is already so good and does what it does so well.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like a heavy Jellicent package, like really truly advances what Gardevoir is doing. And if anything, you can make an argument that it takes away from it because there's 2 prizers in play. It's relatively slow on the damage output, so it gives opponents more time to like gust and take those critical knockouts. And yeah, you got the item lock stuff. That's cute, but the meta, I feel like, has already responded to the item lock stuff.
Yeah, well, and it's interesting, right? You talk about the meta responding. Dragapult decks are playing, significant amounts of boss. Goldango decks.
That's our Goldango. Yeah.
I think are just like the standard right now is just 4 boss. Like, you're really not seeing many Goldango players playing less than 4 boss, and they may even be playing the Iron Bundle as well, like to really kind of solidify if they're at all worried about this matchup. We haven't seen Gardevoir Jellicent perform much in online tournaments, so there's really only like one data set that really backs Gardevoir Jellicent as being a strong choice, and that's the Japanese Champions League from a while back. And that was a bit of a different format because you maybe weren't even dealing with something like Dragapult Dusknoir as strong of a threat it is now because you have Psyduck in that format. So, there's a lot of, things that Jellicent can do. I think you're spot on where it's like when we first saw this card and we were first kind of getting these results out of Japan, it looked like a crazy card, right? And it's like, this is a deck that you need to be playing now to get a feel for it for any tournaments that you're going to be preparing for in this format. But then as it's gone on, we really haven't seen Jellicent kind of take that dominating position. And I completely agree with you where there's nothing that Jellicent adds to the deck that I think like necessarily increases the overall win rate of the deck. You might have certain situations where the Jellicent or the Frillish for that matter are extremely good, right? There are, Goldango obviously, right? To like deny those superiors at the end of the game. Deny early game setup at certain points for against certain decks, right? There are certain situations where Jellicent makes a ton of sense. But is it better? Is it going to increase your win rate more than just playing straight Gardevoir? I think the answer is no, and I think generally collectively the player base has found that, and so we see a lot of players play straight Gardevoir, do fine with it, and really have no concern with the Jellicent. Certainly not in a 2-2 line. Like maybe you'll see a 1-1 line crop up here and there, but by and large, players are ditching the Jellicent and just saying, hey, if I am going to play Gardevoir, it's going to be
I do it right.
the classic. Yeah, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to do the classic version. So, for me, Jellicent, like, I would be surprised. I would be surprised if this deck, a Gardevoir with a Jellicent line, frankly, with all that we've talked about from kind of these soft counters from some of the upper decks and how decks are generally being built to, accommodate Jellicent without it actually having much of a presence, I would be shocked if this made, a top 8 or top 4. I can't, put it in kind of a D tier, but I would say somewhere in that like BC, and frankly, like I would just give it a C tier because we have something that exists that's better.
Yeah, I overall agree with you in that I don't expect this deck to do well at all. I would almost challenge, like, is this actually a D tier deck in the current state of the metagame? And maybe, like, in a vacuum, it's better, but let's just look at the numbers on this, man. Like, the Gardevoir Jellicent deck is rocking, like, 40-some%, like, 42% win rate, I think, against the meta in, like, Limitless share. And obviously the online results don't tell the whole story, but when the story is that like intense, maybe it does have some merit. By comparison, decks like Joltik Box and Eevee that we're putting in the C tier are like 51-52% win rate. It feels almost like a slight on them to put them in the same bucket.
Right I'm with you. So all right, well, let's downgrade it. Let's have a little fun. I mean, how many players will play Gardevoir with Jellicent? I think it's going to be relatively few. Like, if you're a Gardevoir head, this is speculative. This is based on, online results. This is based on where we're at just in the metagame and how decks are built. I don't think it's very friendly right now to Jellicent on the whole, but certainly somewhere I feel like in that 3 to 5% range. I'm going to kind of err on the lower end of that, and maybe 3% of players will bring a Gardevoir deck with the Jellicent variant. So yeah, interesting. I'm open. I would be pleasantly surprised if Jellicent makes some kind of deep run because, you also have the psychology of it, right? Where it's like a lot of players are not even considering item lock outside of Badoo as being a possibility. And so they build their decks to really only accommodate Badoo, but Jellicent is a much stronger item locker in some ways. And so it actually is better into the metagame because players are adjusting their deck. So that maybe is a bit of a storyline, but I don't think a lot of players have put a ton of time into it as the format has progressed. Maybe at the beginning when these cards were revealed, really testing out Jellicent and kind of found, hey, this is not quite up to snuff. So with that, let's move on to our segment on the World's Fantasy. So they used to do this. I'm sad that we haven't seen any announcement of it for this year's Worlds, but they would do this for some of the major tournaments where Pokemon would do this for some of the major tournaments where they would, send out an email and you'd click a link and then you'd go to fill out a form and it would have different categories of some of the best decks or best archetypes or best cards, with certain qualifiers. And so we thought that might be kind of fun to bring to the cast today. And so we have 4 categories of what we think are going to be some of the best performing cards on the weekend. And those categories are Best Basic EX, Best Evolved EX, Best Single Prizer of any stage, and then Best Card from the new set.
Yeah.
So let's get right to it. Riley, what do you think is your best basic EX for the World Championships?
So here's the strat, folks. If you are familiar with the old like Fantasy Worlds concept, the way you would get scored was if a card made an appearance in any count in a deck list, then that counted for that placement. And the points scaled extremely rapidly as you got up towards first. So, like, the world's winning deck was worth way, way more than second place or top four.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, generally speaking, the best way to play the Pokemon Fantasy Worlds game is to hedge extremely hard on what you think the best deck to win the tournament is, and pick only cards that like are going to be played by that deck for all the categories. So for me, I think there's two decks that are kind of in the conversation for me to like really win the tournament, and to me they're Gardevoir and Dragapult. And so I'm going to be true to my roots and go down the Dragapult angle, which means for a basic EX, I would have to choose. I'm going to ban Pheasantipity for myself because that's cheap. And I'm going to pick Latias.
Latias, that's a good one. That's a good one. Okay, that's interesting because I have a somewhat similar thought for this best EX, but with a different kind of outlook. I think Latias overall is probably the better choice because I think you do see Latias in a lot of the Dragapult Dusknoir lists and straight Dragapult, and you have things like Joltik Box, and potentially, like something like Terrabox, Ho, Armarouge, some of these big basic decks, right? So that's an interesting inclusion. I kind of went the opposite way of, instead of like a support Pokemon, I went an attacking Pokemon. So my choice there for best basic EX is the Blood Moon Ursaluna.
Ooh, that's a good one too.
Yeah. I mean, I think you see that, certainly in a wide variety of decks. You have it in Dragapult, you have it in Joltik, you have it potentially in Raging Bolt as well, right? There's a number of different decks that could play the Ursaluna, but that's going to be my choice. So yeah, you kind of went more on that support angle. I took the bit more aggressive angle on that. All right, best evolved EX. I'll go first on this one. Kind of rotate here on that. Best evolved EX. The cop out answer just has to be, I think, has to be Dragapult. You see it in, it should be kind of the most played deck. I think that we're looking at it as one of the highest tier decks. And to me, the format is really warping around Dragapult. We've seen Dragapult really come to the fore. I think one of the best things for Dragapult in the new black and white format is the introduction of Hilda, because now you're seeing those, you're seeing lists be built around the Neo Upper, and now they can actually find that Neo Upper when they, a lot more easily, right? As opposed to just drawing into it raw. And so I think, Dragapult, it got like a slight buff with Hilda, but you're seeing like 2 or 3 Hilda in these lists, and it's like setting up your Dracloak or finding your Dragapult EX, and then you're getting that energy. And it really makes it a lot smoother, because I think generally for these Dragapult decks, if they can find that first Dragapult, so long as your opponent can't blow it up in one turn, like that is setting you up for a really strong mid and late game off of that Neo Upper. And it's just a really big deal. So best evolved EX for me is going to be Dragapult. Maybe I kind of stole some thunder there. I think that's a pretty safe choice.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's got to be Dragapult as well. And like I said, I'm hedging entirely on Dragapult with the picks I'm trying to make here. So I think Dragapult is just so good. It's reliable. It's powerful. It plays well into kind of like the way you want games to go for you in this format. Trying to dodge activating Pheasantipity, trying to dodge Iono. So yeah, stand by all the things I've said. Dragapult is the best evolving EX.
Okay. Excellent. All right, best single prizer. Who you got?
Yeah, best single prizer. That's tough. I mean, the obvious answer, I guess, is Monkey Dory, right? That covers so many decks right now and is just a flexible, powerful, honestly, like season defining card. Like, it came out last year at Worlds and didn't see a ton of play at Worlds, but has seen an obscene amount of play ever since.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I guess it's gotta be Monkey. Other top contenders in my mind, if you want to go full hedge mode, you could say Dracloak. If
Mm-hmm.
you want to go like middle ground, you could go Badoo.
I'm going to take a different angle here. I'm going to go Noctowl. This covers, like, if I'm completely wrong with Dragapult and there emerges some other new archetype or some other new, challenger, I think, you're either looking at, you can kind of divide it into like Gardevoir decks, Dragapult decks, Noctowl decks. I think that like covers a wide swath of the meta. So if things that I'm predicting with Dragapult to, turn out not be true, then I think there's, certainly a lot of room for Noctowl. So I like that as a card that covers, you got your Flareons, you got your Raging Bolts, you got your Terras, some Charizard lists might play Noctowl. There's a lot of things there. So I'll take Noctowl to be a little bit of a descent. So let's move into the last category. Yeah. The best card from the new set. I mean, there's a lot of really good cards. We talked about Hilda.
I don't know about a lot. There's a couple cards, but they're very, very good.
Yeah, we talked about Hilda. That's like, again, if you're like really hedging for Dragapult, that's gotta be your choice. I'm gonna go with Air Balloon. Air Balloon is a big deal.
Air Balloon too.
Yeah, Air Balloon is a really big deal. Goldango is just loving the Air Balloon, but really any deck that has Pokemon that have 2 retreat. And Zoroark, Grimmsnarl come to mind. Air Balloon and Charizard, right? That's just a significant improvement over the rescue board. So for me, I'll take Air Balloon and again, might not be the best strategy if we're talking like a Worlds draft, but that's what I'm gonna go with.
Yeah, I was thinking back in the day, I think there were only Pokemon that you could actually draft, but Air Balloon is actually going to be my pick just because I think that card, its overall impact, is probably going to be higher than Hilda's in the grand scheme of things. Like, super, super good card. It's nice to see it back, very powerful, but it's not as overwhelmingly powerful as Floatstone,
Yeah.
Which is a card that probably just should never, ever come back. Because that was ridiculous. Just retreating was not even a concept when Floatstone is legal.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
So Air Balloon I think is a good choice. I think Hilda would be like the ultimate Dragapult hedge choice. I think if I want to keep like a full Pokemon lineup, which I think is a fun way to do it, I'm trying to think what would be a good.
You have like,
I guess Genesect EX would be.
I was gonna say Genesect. You have Zekrom, but that's like really off the.
I'm more of a Genesect believer than a Lightning believer, so we'll go Genesect EX just to go for a full Pokemon lineup.
Nice.
And dodge the Hilda.
I mean, would we be surprised to see like 3 of the top 8 be Goldango? Like, I wouldn't. Deck's really good.
Not really, no.
Deck's really good.
I think that's probably more than I would expect, but I wouldn't be like, oh my god, like 3 Goldango.
How did that ever happen? Yeah, exactly. So, all right, let's shift it back to our tier list and let's wrap this up. We were talking about Gardevoir, Jellicent, and we wanted to kind of come back to the segment with our straight Gardevoir build. I really see straight Gardevoir as being in a solid spot. I think the way I would play it is probably with an elevated bravery charm count. I think there's a number of reasons for that. If you can chain back to back to back Drifloons, that's going to give you a really strong chance against Goldango. It's going to give you an extremely strong chance into that deck, which is, a bad matchup. But, again, if you can chain the single prize for one-shots, all while Ionoing the hand down, you got a good shot. That's a recipe for success. The Bravery Charms are also extremely helpful against the Dragapult decks, right? Dragapult on its own can 2-shot a monkey, assuming you don't have a dark energy attached to it. But they can also like pop a Clops and then one shot a monkey and just remove that off the board. That's a really big deal for a lot of these Dragapult decks to do. Even so much so that straight Dragapult decks will include a 1/1 Clops line to make that play, right? But you can attach the Bravery Charms, and that's now, it just makes it really annoying to knock out the monkeys. Bravery Charms are really cool on your EX Pokemon. So you got the Mew EX, right? Just bump that HP up. You got the Pheasantipity, obviously. Really good card to have that attached to. So a little bit of survivability there. Gives you a little bit more of a win rate into a Joltik box. Again, we talked about hands not being able to knock out Monkey Dory. So I think there's a lot of use cases for, and a lot of reasons to include, again, like an elevated Bravery Charm count to really focus the list on Bravery Charm. I also think one of the best things for Gardevoir right now, yes, you're looking at a shaky Goldengo matchup. Maybe there's some things you can do to adjust that. But Grimmsnarl, for me, I think is a deck that is on the decline. I think it saw its peak at NAIC. I think it will not be, anywhere near the play rate that we saw at NAIC, and I think Gardevoir really just benefits from that. So to me, this is like an S or an A tier deck. It feels kind of cheap with the season that Gardevoir had to put it in an A tier. So I'm kind of curious your thoughts here of where you see Gardevoir positioned.
I think Gardevoir is amazing as well. One of the pros of Gardevoir in my mind is it does take a slightly favorable Dragapult matchup as well. Dragapult being the S tier deck, having a slightly favorable matchup is very nice. Honestly, the one matchup, or maybe the two that Gardevoir feels like it'll fear the most are Goldango and maybe Grimmsnarl. But anything else, it really feels like you kind of get to coast and eventually just scale up and destroy them. I can tell you, like, I haven't played a ton of Gardevoir myself, but sitting across from Gardevoir consistently over the course of the whole season is always the matchup I'm most terrified to be sitting across from. Because I always feel like I'm just a turn away from being smoked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So where do you put it here, Riley? Do you think it's an S tier play for the tournament? Maybe a bit lower?
Oh, yeah. I do think you're right. It's kind of on that border of S and A. To me, I think Gardevoir, in the best Gardevoir players' hands, with the best builds for the tournament, is an S tier deck.
All right. Easy enough. And what's a play rate here?
What's a play rate? That's the amount of play a deck gets used, JW.
Yeah.
I think it probably shoots out like kind of similar, like maybe 11 or so percent, 12%.
Yeah. Okay.
For a Gardevoir deck.
I like that. Yeah, probably second most played, if you don't count aggregation of Dragapult. All right, let's kind of zoom through some of these other ones. Grimmsnarl, I'm going to speak to this, and then we can maybe move on. I don't see this as a particularly strong play. I think, maybe 2 weeks ago you would have had it in A tier, and I think that, you look at the online play of Grimmsnarl, it's a pretty heavily played deck in the online sphere, but I've played it pretty heavily online and, on ladder, and then I've brought it to a couple of tournaments, and while I did win my challenge, I kind of flamed out at the cup that I went to. It just feels like the deck doesn't, you're not like ever really helping yourself by playing Grimmsnarl. Like every single match is a slog. It's very difficult. You're doing a lot of damage calculations. It's a very mentally taxing deck, I think more so than anything else on this list. And so I think generally like players will, certainly the world's level players are not going to have an issue necessarily with that, but I don't see this deck as having, as much of a chokehold on the format or as much of a presence in the format as it did at NAIC. I see that kind of dwindling a bit. Again, probably a good thing for Gardevoir players, and Dragapult players for that matter. But the Goldango matchup is, I wouldn't say irredeemably bad. There are maybe some things you can do, but I do see Goldango players teching against Grimmsnarl. You have the issue of Flareon. If Gardevoir players go more toward being able to one-shot Grimmsnarls, that can also be, a big deal if they play more Bravery Charms. So, all these things kind of in combination are are issues for Grimmsnarl. I see it as a B tier deck, a solid B tier deck, no doubt, but something in that B tier, and I put it at maybe about 8% play.
I think I agree with your take overall. I still think it probably has a place in the A tier. Maybe that's too generous, but I feel like it has a place in the A tier. Like when I think of the B tier decks, and maybe this is a good segue, I definitely would think of decks like Ogerpon, Raging Bolt Ogerpon, for example, or Dragapult Charizard, or even Charizard Pidgeot or Enzorark. Like those are kind of that B tier for me, and I think Grimmsnarl is easily better than any of those decks, and so it's kind of like bottom of A for me.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll move it there to satisfy your needs. That's fine.
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate when my needs are satisfied.
I just don't see. I don't know. I just don't see Grimothy Snarl being, being a deck that can win the tournament, right? And I kind of see that as like S and A tier decks are like decks that I am expecting to make that deep run. I don't quite have that same level of confidence for Grimmsnarl, but A tier is fine. I suppose maybe you have a different opinion, but of the players on the cast, like I have the most play with Grimmsnarl. I feel like I'm pretty locked in there.
That's fair. So, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say it's the very top of B tier though. Like if it's a B tier deck, it's
without a doubt
the best of them.
It's good. It's good. Okay, all right. Then for me, I'm gonna satisfy my own desires. Let's put it in B.
Okay,
maybe I'll be completely wrong. The other issue that I see with Grimmsnarl, there's not a ton of wiggle room. Like I don't see anyone innovating much with the deck, and that
there's not really innovation to be had.
That obviously leads to some issues, right? It's like you're not gonna sneak, surprise anyone. It's like everyone knows they play one TM Devo. Everyone knows the entire kind of 55 cards of the list, and then there's not really too much you can do to like surprise anyone or really make any of these matchups much better than they already are. So, again, that I think hurts the deck in the sense that better players can play around certain lines that Grimmsnarl otherwise has. Let's talk about Raging Bolt. That to me is a very solid B tier deck, and it's kind of interesting because we saw it at NAIC perform like pretty well, I would say, all things considered. It was the most played deck. Our group brought it to NAIC. Didn't do fantastic on the whole, but Andrew was right in it till the very end. It had the most play at NAIC, and it had the most conversion, right? It has like a 14% play rate and a 14% conversion, so it didn't like fall off. It had decent showings. It wasn't really towards the top of the NAIC final standings, but it is a deck that players will bring to Worlds. I think on the whole, it'll probably be in a lower percentage. Like I don't see a lot of Worlds caliber players saying, yes, I'm really excited in this format to be playing Raging Bolt, especially when you look at a deck like Goldengo getting a bunch of buffs that now make it pretty comparable to Raging Bolt in terms of a turn 2 one-hit KO. So, I just don't love this archetype, again, especially as some of these other decks have really evolved and gotten some new tools or kind of changed their builds to accommodate the new format. Raging Bolt's really stayed the same, not a lot of innovation, and just doesn't seem like a deck that the better players are going to be bringing.
Yeah, I would agree on the whole. I think the fact that Goldango can now comfortably go first and expect to like get a board fully ready on the second turn makes it like a by and large superior version of Raging Bolt in a lot of ways. Raging Bolt does have its own benefits. It has the baby Raging Bolt for the snipe. It has, the single prize angle with cards like Slitherwing to take out things like Pikachu. But I think on the whole, as like a one-shot deck, Goldango is going to get those one-shots maybe a little easier, and it's going to be able to gust on the same turn more frequently as its knockouts.
Mm-hmm. Great. So where do you want to put this in terms of meta share?
I think I'm just looking at NAIC. It was a 16% play deck. That's crazy high, but it was also pretty people were hot on it going into that tournament. I don't think people are hot on it going into this tournament. I could see it being that 9% range, 8% range.
Yep. I'm kind of thinking the same there. All right. So that's Raging Bolt, Ogerpon. Yeah, I think some of these, I'm just going to kind of, quickly brush through some of these. Ethan's Typhlosion has some interesting aspects to it. I mean, it's probably the most powerful single prize deck if you exclude Gardevoir. It has a great matchup, obviously, into Goldango. Struggles a bit with some of these spread decks. Dragapult is going to be tough, being able to take multi-prize knockouts in any given turn. Going to struggle a bit with some of the ultra fast decks, but you make up for it with a really strong late game. Probably should be in that kind of like 3 to 5% range. I don't see this as being a real, maybe even 5%. I think is very generous. Maybe in that like 2 to 3% range. Looking ahead as well to like the Charizard decks. I'm not a big believer in Charizard. Maybe you are. I'm going to just lump these together in C, and Charizard Pidgeot maybe like 5%. You look at Charizard Dragapult maybe at that like 3%. I don't see players like gravitating, oh yes, this is buying away the best deck in the format. I just don't see that. So to me, Charizard by and large towards the end of this season has just been, and you could correct me if I'm wrong here, but has just felt kind of like a comfort pick for a lot of players. And that's why we're seeing the percentages that it has. And it doesn't really offer anything, unusual or fantastic or meta defining by any means.
Yeah, so, I think Charizard also had a lot of like, well, Charizard's such a good card. Like, how can I make it work?
It is. Yeah.
And I just feel like, I don't even think Charizard Dusknoir is like a thing, to be honest. I think we'll see some Charizard, some Charizard Pidgeot, some Charizard Dragapult, maybe even more Charizard Dragapult, because that's just like, okay, how can I make Charizard a thing? Like, I'll pair it with the other best card in the format, and like, there we go.
Ride the coattails of Dragapult.
Like literally though, that's entirely the goal of the deck. Yeah, I just don't really see it putting up numbers or succeeding. Also, the fact that Charizard shares like the grass weakness, it's going to lose to the Ogerpons and the Leafeons, and it's also just generally susceptible to Dragapult. It's just not a good day to be Charizard, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm with you there. We got Terrabox. I'll put this in a D tier. Probably in that 2% might be a bit generous. There are some benefits, I think, to playing Terrabox. Like I think generally Shaman has been on the decline for a lot of these decks.
It has. It definitely has.
But then, there's just a lot. Like I look at the rest of the format, and there's a lot to hate. Like there's just I'm not really like seeing the match. Like even with Shaman, by and large, being gone from a lot of these top decks. I mean, maybe like a third of these decks will play Shaman because they're frankly worried more about the Raging Bolt snipe or the Gardevoir snipe, and then Terrabox just takes an unfortunate arrow to the knee in that sense. But yeah, Terrabox, I'm just looking at like kind of these matchups, and it doesn't see, nothing excites me about what I would see at the World Championships with Terrabox.
I mean, here Terrabox at like the peak of its theoretical popularity really struggled to convert, and I don't really see how the deck's gotten substantially better since then. I did have one of my friends reach out to me who was like very interested to hear takes about Terrabox because it was testing really well for them. But I think on the whole, like Terrabox is going to be a not super highly represented deck, and to me, like Terrabox struggles in a lot of the same way like some of these other like lower to the ground basic decks struggle. If it doesn't shut you out, it struggles to put it away.
Right.
And the decks that we see at the top of like A and S tier are absolutely able to put the game away.
Yes. That's very true. That's very true. And set up like these checkmate boards, right? Where sometimes Terrabox can't have everything online to like confirm it, right? They need to draw into it, right? In a lot of cases. That's interesting. I mean, there might be an angle with Terrabox to like play like heavily into the Lily's Clefairy and play some of the Lily's Pearl. That has certainly been a way to build Terrabox. So, maybe there's kind of a new brew of Terrabox that we're not quite thinking of, but by and large, this is, not a deck that we're really recommending for players. Let's talk about Enzork just briefly. I mean, not... this actually has a few kind of different variants you can kind of lump in together. There's like Zork with Dragapult. There's Enzork with the Darmanitan. There's just Enzork with like maybe a very light Darmanitan. We saw that, I think, get top 32 at NAIC, or a version of that, or maybe it was even higher. Maybe it was top 16. No, it made top 8. It was a 1/1 Darmanitan line, and then it kind of focused on just tanking a hit and then dishing it back out with the Reshiram. So like that's kind of interesting. Probably not a deck that sees a ton of play. Ho Armarouge, really kind of putting it in that same
complete false deck. Yeah,
maybe like a 1%. That's somebody's pet deck that they bring because again they have more reps with Ho Armarouge than anyone else in the world, and they're ready to show it off. Now I think the last deck that we have here is a very interesting one, and that's Crustle. I wanted to give it its due as kind of the last deck we talk about. To me, this seems like, it's like hovering in that like. I think a very solid B tier, right? Like you have a lot of these polarizing matchups, but that can be okay when the good matchups all hover towards the top end of the list, right? You're expecting a lot of the best players to play Goldango. You're expecting a lot of the best players to play, Grimmsnarl, Dragapult. You really only care about Gardevoir. That's like your big L. But pretty much everything else on the list is focusing on EX Pokemon, which Crustle loves. So, given that this is the Iron Thorns of this year's Worlds, the big kind of stall or wall archetype, where do you see Crustle fitting in for Anaheim?
It's tough because I feel like Crustle isn't very good against the S tier decks. So if we're looking at Dragapult, Dusknoir, and Gardevoir as our S tier, Crustle isn't that good against either of those. Gardevoir, of course, has a litany of attackers. It's probably the worst matchup for Crustle besides Easton's Typhlosion.
Yeah.
And Dragapult Dusknoir has the ability to attack with the Dusknoir if it wants to. It can blow up a Dusknoir and use spread to KO Crustles. So it's tricky. It's a fine deck. I think you're spot on in that it's kind of like occupies a similar space as Iron Thorns did last year. And Iron Thorns won the whole freaking tournament, So you can definitely win a tournament. To me, it's kind of similar to Joltik Box to me in the sense that Crustle like abstracts away the gameplay as your route to win the tournament and instead is like more matchup focused. So you're putting the skill more into like I'm predicting the meta for this tournament and less into I'm going to outplay my opponent's game over game, which is in my opinion is fine. It's a valid way to play the game. And I think actually a huge part of the skill of any Pokemon tournament is predicting the meta as we're trying to do right now. So I think Crustle's fine. I could see it making a deep run, and frankly, I could see it winning the tournament, but it does have very polarizing matchups, and it's really easy to kind of like drown with a deck like Crustle.
Yeah, without a doubt. So
I think B is fine for it.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big storyline to me is Crustle and whether or not it'll show up and whether or not players will respect it. We've kind of talked about like Cornerstone, how you can jam it into a lot of things. Crustle obviously plays a Cornerstone or two. That's a big card for the deck. But there are ways with Dragapult to beat the matchup. You can attack with the Dusknoir, pop your Dusknoirs, attack with Badoo, attack with Dracloak. Like there's a lot of like alternate ways to really put pressure on Crustle. You have a Monkey Dory potentially in some of the Dragapult decks. And then Gardevoir obviously is just like, if you can dodge Gardevoir, if you can make that bet with Satan of like, I'm going to dodge all the Gardevoir, I think you're going to be pretty successful, right? Like I think you probably cash if you're a Crustle player that does not play a Gardevoir day one or day two. I think you're probably having a really good time to be fair. And if this is completely wrong, and if you know of somebody who played Crustle who did not cash at the World Championships and did not hit a single Gardevoir, like pass them my way because They must have just gotten insanely
I
unlucky.
would love to hear their story.
I would love to hear their story. Absolutely. So, all that said, yeah, Crustle, it's interesting. It's an interesting spot. I think that's a big storyline for the weekend, is whether or not this counter deck can show up. I don't have a ton of faith in it, but I didn't have a ton of faith in Iron Thorns last year.
Do we even have Iron Thorns on our radar?
I was thinking about Iron Thorns. I really was. Yeah, last year, because I had...
I'm trying to just remember.
The problem with Iron Thorns, it's the same with Crustle, is like, you could not be Gardevoir if they played a Turo. It was that kind of thing. It's like, okay, if they don't play one specific card in Gardevoir, and then you obviously, like, Iron Thorns has somewhat of an issue with Regidrago too, and there were some other kind of rougher matchups, but it was really like the Gardevoir matchup that kind of put me over the edge to really not play Iron Thorns. And I think same here for Crustle, is you can dodge Gardevoir.
That dang Gardevoir deck, dude.
I know. I hope it'll rotate one day.
I hope it definitely is going to rotate, but still got some life in it.
Still got some life in it, and I think it'll dominate. Yeah, I mean, that's my prediction if we're gonna pick a deck to do well at Worlds. For me, it's gonna be Gardevoir. Riley, what would you're kind of hedging on the Dragapult?
Yeah, I mean, and to also say a different answer, I would say Dragapult. But to me, like, those two Stage 2 EXs that have been around for months and months are the format definers. They're the season definers, and in some ways, isn't it just appropriate for them to also be the world's definers after their entire story of this entire year?
Yeah, it is appropriate. They do need world decks, that's for sure. So
Gardevoir has one, but not with the Monkey Dory.
Yeah, not with Monkey Dory is kind of where I'm getting at. But with that, there's a lot of action this weekend to follow. You know that Riley and I will be glued to our screens following all the action, and we'll bring you an update next week on what went down. So if you liked this episode, if you watched it on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe, like the video so other people see it. The YouTube has been great, actually. It's really kind of week after week. It's been, I've definitely been noticing kind of the momentum gain from a lot of regular listeners coming back. So thank you so much for that. If you're on Spotify, please make sure to like and follow the channel. Leave a comment on both those platforms as well, whether or not you think we're way off base with these meta predictions or right on the money, what you agree with, what you don't agree with. But that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to plug into the podcast even more, you can find us on X. I am at Real John Walter, and Riley's at Smiles with Riles, and the podcast at Tag Team Pokemon.
Thank you all so much for listening and your continued support, and we'll catch you next time. Peace.
See you.